So for me, peace begins with every individual. A restless mind sitting on a very high authoritative chair, say in a multinational agency, will never be able to make decisions that brings back peace. So peace evidently begins with every individual. Then it grows into a family. A peaceful family will make a peaceful community, and a peaceful community together, different places together will make a peaceful world. So that would be my contribution and my idea about peace.
Thank you very much, Shantanu, and very interesting also this point, which you stated. We don't let like the identity of peace be something apart from us. It's at least from us. So thank you very much for this insight. So I don't know if there is another intervention and contribution on this. If no, I see that the speaker of the next session is in the call, so I kindly invite Antara Jha to join the floor and to take the presentation. Maybe Antara, you can introduce yourself and let's start with the presentation. I will be back in anything you need, but I saw that also there is the Vanshu that can help and support you. So, Antara, welcome to the Climate Social Forum. Such a pleasure to have you here. Antara, can you hear us? I don't know that I see her in the call. Hi, Antara, welcome.
Hello.
Hello, hi, welcome.
Hello.
Yes, can you hear us?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Antara.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Am I audible? Okay. Thank you. Hello to everyone. I'm Antara Jha from India, and today I'll be sharing my thoughts and views on climate justice with you all. Climate change, in my opinion, is one of the most serious issues confronting the globe today. Climate change is no longer a distant concern. It is happening right now, and unfortunately, there is no planet B. Our only choice is to minimize pollution and greenhouse gas emissions in order to rescue our Mother Earth from the harmful effects. As a result, we must create a suitable
Just one moment, that maybe
environment in which we may live with little pollution. The impacts of climate change will not be equally on for rich and poor, women and men, and older and younger generations. Consequently, there has been a growing focus on climate justice, which looks at the climate crisis through a human rights lens and on the belief that by working together, we can create a better future for present and future generations. Now, please, slide 2. The climate justice is the concept of ensuring fair treatment from any kind of discrimination against the negative impacts of climate change, both individually and collectively, in the form of adaptation and mitigation strategies. We are building our capacity to respond to the climate change, but the dimensions of environmental justice, equal treatment in the policy making, and even the clear definition of vulnerable groups are often neglected. The climate justice is an evidence-based response to the environmental injustice and helpful in creation of fair policies and strategies to address the impacts of global warming by empowering the vulnerable groups with required legal resources, provision to ensuring necessary funding and capability to deal existing discrimination. in the society. Historically, the climate justice had begun with its recognition by the international bodies and legal frameworks. It specifies the need of proactive participation of the developed countries to resolve the issues of global warming, which has fueled by their ambitions, and they should help the developing countries with technological advances and finance to respond to climate change. The dimension of climate justice for the individuals and the vulnerable groups is to achieve a fair, equitable, and sustainable legal solution to deal with the existing injustice in the society. It is a new kind of environmental movement which is advocating for achieving a socially responsible, scientifically sound, and economically fairly distributed legal framework. Climate justice offers a fair treatment and equal platform to deal with the inconsistencies in the recognition of different vulnerable groups and lack of opportunities for involving in decision-making system. Now, what are the importance? There is little doubt that climate change will lead to unprecedented changes in the natural environment, which will in turn affect the way we live with potentially dramatic consequences on our health, energy sources, and food production systems. There is also increasing recognition that these impacts are being felt disproportionately by poor people who already live under precarious conditions. Climate change, with its many facets, further exacerbates existing inequalities faced by these vulnerable groups. It threatens to undermine the realization of fundamental rights for many people and to reverse progress made towards the achievement of the internationally agreed development goals, including the MDGs. It is a global justice concern that those who suffer most from climate change have done the least to cause it. The concept of climate justice acknowledges that because the world's richest countries have contributed most to the problem, they have a greater obligation to take action and to do so more quickly. However, many fear that whatever international agreement is reached between governments, it will compound the already unjust burden on the poor and vulnerable. A rapidly growing number of social movements and civil society organizations across the world are mobilizing around this climate justice agenda. Citizens from both South and the North are drawn to this concept, in part because many are already experiencing the impacts of climate change and they worry about the fate of their families, homes, and livelihoods. Next. The climate justice is an environmental movement ensuring the social, ecological, and economical justice for everyone who contributed the least in causing of global warming, but is likely to be the most affected by it. The question arises that who should pay the price of consequences of the global warming and how to ensure the equal treatment in policy making, inclusivity of all vulnerable groups, and fair distribution of resources to respond to the impact of climate change. The answer is climate justice framework, and its first success is in acknowledging the existing injustice toward those who contributed the least in the causing, as well as in safeguarding their rights with strong evidence-based policy framework. For example, the vulnerable groups are likely to suffer most from the negative impacts of global warming, and in addition, they are also adversely affected by some policy responses from the government and decision-making processes, which often excludes them. Climate justice was embedded in the international legal frameworks in 1980s, where principles of fairness and equity are included in the common and differentiated responsibility theory of UNFCCC, that is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and in the provisions of Kyoto Protocol, in particular, considering the role of individual states in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This provides the basic framework of climate justice at any level as associated to resolve the challenges associated with unequal distribution of resources, distribution of responsibility, distribution of the costs and benefits of policies and responses to climate change. Next, please. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, leading international scientific body on climate change, states that greenhouse gas emissions must peak in the coming few years, and without the international coordination and cooperation, the world will not be able to avoid the worst ever impacts of climate change in near future. It calculates that maintaining average global temperatures between 2 and 2.4 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial levels will require global emission cuts between 50 and 85% over 2000 levels by 2050. These events result in the impacts that are either tangible, like property loss, or intangible, such as effects on mental health with implications for short-term or long-term perspective. The figure explains that the one who contributed the least in the emissions of greenhouse gases will be the most impacted by the impacts of climate change. In first figure, the countries around the world with carbon dioxide emission per capita, and we can see the developed countries with high emissions and low emissions of greenhouse gases are by the least developed countries. So this can be inferred that developed economy was based on fossil fuels and which contributed to higher rates of greenhouse gases emission, and that leads to climate change. And in the second figure shows the vulnerability of countries to the climate change in the world. By comparison, we can easily understand that the countries who contributed least to the greenhouse gases emissions are more vulnerable to the climate change. IPCC assessment reports of the year 2001, 2007, 2014 are documented that the impacts of climate change are not only limited to the drastic changes in rainfall, weather events, and rising sea levels, but also include ocean acidification, compromising fisheries, livelihoods, and children's nutritional status. Changes in vector-borne disease, extending malaria and other tropical diseases into highland populations for the first time. Air pollution due to high ozone levels affecting children's lung development and health, general health, and economical issues. Next, please. Human beings should be at the center of concerns for sustainable development as per the 1992 Rio Declaration on Environment and Development. Climate change may be the most significant challenge the world faces today. It will affect everyone, regardless of geographical location or socioeconomic status. It may determine the way we produce food, our access to water, our health, where we live, and the diversity of plant and animal species. No other current claims can claim the scale of climate change and the scope of the potential catastrophe if the world fails to act in time. As a phenomenon that affects the whole world, climate change clearly warrants a comprehensive global response. One of the most fundamental gaps involves the equity dimensions of climate change. Climate change at its heart reveals the still stark divides in resources, development paths, and emissions contributions between rich and poor nations, and rich and poor people within those nations. Almost all aspects of climate change can be traced along these lines. Who has caused it? Who can cope with it? And how? Who will survive and even benefit? And who will be the hardest hit by its consequences? Next, please. Climate change began in the rapid development spurred by the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, although its effects are being felt today. In just under 20 years, the international community has formally recognized that climate change is taking place. It has agreed that greenhouse gas emissions must be mitigated and adaptation strategies put in place to shelter people from climate threats. Commitments to share technology and resources have been made, but emissions continue to grow on an unsustainable scale. In nature, greenhouse gases make up only about 1% of the Earth's atmosphere, where they act like the glass roof of a greenhouse and trap heat. Adding more of them means trapping more heat. So global temperatures rise. Since the Industrial Revolution, the natural levels of greenhouse gases have been supplemented by emissions of carbon dioxide from the burning of fossil fuels, such as coal, oil, and natural gas, by methane and nitrous oxide from farming and deforestation, and by several long-lived gases from industrial production. Pre-industrial levels of carbon dioxide, the most prevalent greenhouse gas, were at 278 parts per million, a figure that is now at 380 ppm, that is parts per million. Since all human beings are dependent on the Earth's resources, these impacts extract a direct economic and development cost in lives, livelihoods, health, food security, and so on. The Stern Review estimated that the cost of extreme weather alone could reach 0.5 to 1% of world gross domestic product per year by the middle of the century. It has also been predicted that if greenhouse gas emissions continue unchecked, climate change will reduce global per capita consumption between 5% and 20%. Estimated economic damages between $30 billion and $60 billion, with insurance coverage of around 60% in Puerto Rico and total insurance coverage of between $15 billion and $30 billion. Next, please. According to the World Bank, a single multinational corporation, shale, has contributed more greenhouse gas emissions through burning gas as part of oil extraction in Nigeria than all other sources of greenhouse gases in sub-Saharan Africa combined. One unjust irony of climate change is that even though developing countries have historically contributed less to emissions and most continue to have a small carbon footprint, as a group, they will suffer earliest and most from harmful shifts in the environment. Next, please. Now, the relevance of climate justice, which I want to discuss over here. The first, development versus environment degradation. Measures taken for development largely have negative impact on the environment. Climate change negatively impacts rainfall patterns, increases food security risks in the vulnerable countries, cities sinking due to rising sea levels, etc. IPCC reports have given strict warning about the devastating impacts of rising global temperature beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius. Second point, that is prioritizing investment. Developing countries particularly lack funds for investment for implementing climate change actions. Funds generated through clean development mechanism are inadequate to handle the current crisis. Climate justice provides for the possibility to prioritize investment around the vulnerabilities of the communities worst affected by climate change. The third point is resistance shown by developed countries, with USA coming out of Paris deal and Canadian Parliament refusing increased investment in climate change actions, shows the neglect of developed nations and their refusal to accept their historical responsibilities. Climate justice focuses on inequitable nature of impact of climate change and brings into the picture accountability for actions done by some countries over the other countries. Next, please. Today, billions of poor people are forced to live in poor conditions, unhygienic places, and less safeguard from changing climate than others, which made them more vulnerable to risks. The next levels of threats came into picture when the other parameters involved, such as gender, age, status of health, caste, ethnicity, and demographic locations. As we see, mostly poor communities and few vulnerable groups are pushed outskirts of the cities to live, where they have to deal with all kinds of pollutions, low quality of life, and with limited access in comparison with the people living in the city with better quality of life. Lindley et al. Draw attention on the existing research, which are identifying the affecting societal, environmental, and personal factors on the different effects produced by flood or heat waves. The most concerned area of discrimination is gender discrimination, which is responsible for widely known inequalities in the political, social, and economic systems. Even today, women are the ones with the less powerful voices in politics, limited access of required resources, and limited capacities to claim basic rights. According to the IPCC reports, in extreme weather conditions and natural disasters, that is flood brought to us by climate change, women die at higher rate than men, indicating their vulnerability. The two most important resources which are most vulnerable to climate change are drinking water and fuel. And the women are the ones who collect and utilize the drinking water in most of the rural areas and collect resources for the fuel required to cook food at home. It is analyzed that in the rural areas, women are more dependent on the agriculture for food and basic requirements. This is one of the reasons that women have more need for excess of energy and its related services for households in both rural and urban areas. In some areas, women are responsible for forest resources management and contribute extensively in the farming or agriculture practices. And many places, women participate in crop harvesting, which is the only source of income and which makes them more vulnerable. It is reported that the rise in food prices impacts women severely, and particularly girls, because their health condition deteriorates more and faster than males in the times of food shortage. So this makes sense to include women as a vulnerable group, and their inclusion in the decision making is necessary. Next slide. Climate justice humanizes the effect of climate change and insists on a shift from discourse on greenhouse gases and melting ice caps into a civil rights movement, with the people and communities most vulnerable to climate impacts at its heart. There is an urgent need for civil society groups to put pressure on governments to take the path of sustainable development and make climate change actions a top priority. There is an important need of evening out the imbalances that are not sustainable in nature, and urgent need for development of tailored policy responses for groups which are vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. The recommendations are made for further research to bridge the gaps in the theory of climate change, in which the local authorities, trusted agencies and organizations that work with particular social groups and possess the local knowledge about knowledge should collaborate to be the path of targeted information and advice on impacts on climate change for vulnerable groups. In order to achieve climate justice, an approach is required that tackles climate change impacts and social vulnerability together. Climate justice is a strong medium to awaken the society toward the impacts and issues of climate change. This provides a strong tool for the vulnerable group and shared responsibility for all to understand the importance of environment as a whole, and human well-being is directly proportional to environment. Thank you for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share my views on the current climate crisis and its impact on us. With that, I would like to end my speech.
Thank you so much, Antara. Amazing presentation, and you cover lots of aspects. So thank you very much for your contribution. Excellent speech. I'm agreeing with the commentary in the chat. So I saw that we were two rising
Sorry,
hands.
voice is not audible.
Oh, but just one moment. But it's just a problem of Antara, or everyone is experiences. Can you hear me?
Voice is not audible.
Okay.
Yeah, now I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, congratulations. I want to say congratulations. Was a very complete presentation. You cover several aspects all together, very connected. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I saw that were two raised hands in the chat that are Shruti and Vani. I don't know who wants to go first. Shruti. If you want to take the floor. Devanshu, go ahead.
So first I would like to say that was a really nice presentation, and it was a manner like what is happening around us. So I have a question regarding that the people working in this area are facing right now, according to you.
So we cannot hear so well. So kind of like a
Sorry, yes, we are not able to hear what he said exactly.
Is it clear now?
No, you have
No.
I think a problem with the audio. Maybe you can write it down.
Yes, I'll write it.
Okay. So in the meanwhile, Devanshu is writing the question. As I said, I saw Shruti sing with the raised hand, and Vani. Shruti, if you want to, yeah. Go ahead, please. We cannot hear you. Okay,
yeah, I think Devanshu has posted any one question over there, right?
Yes, you can respond.
Yeah. So
just one moment. Yes, just one moment. Shruti, just 1 second, please. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think Devanshu's question is that what are the challenges? I mean, he wants to ask the challenges. Yeah. So I think according to me, the biggest challenge is that to make people aware related to this climate change and all, because I think most of the people still are not aware of this issue. And after raising this point, according to me, I think that implementation is also very important, because until and unless the implementation will come in order, I don't think that this can take place. So these are the challenges which I think is which can come.
Thank you, Antara. Shruti, if you can go ahead. Or also Vani. So actually, in the meanwhile that Vani or Shruti if they want to intervene. I have a question to you, Antara.
Yeah,
So
sure.
you face really well also the rise of the movements that are now struggling and fighting for climate justice and claiming for like a solution to climate change and so on. Yes, I want to ask you an overview of which is the situation in your country, and how do you see the future of these movements? How they can maybe, I don't know, uh, work together, or how do you think they can strategize their action in a way?
According to me, thank you for the question. According to me, I think that from the grassroots level, every student should, should make aware related to this, and not making them educated regarding this. I think that making them practical as well also is very important. So after that, this can increase at a level when they could understand that what is climate change, climate justice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the answer. Thank you. So I don't know if there are other questions from for Antara. Also, I saw some Italian speaker. If they want to make some question also in Italian, we can translate to Antara. And yes, I invite for the last time Vani and Shruti if they want to state something, even though we can go ahead. Okay, I've seen that there are no other questions or points. So, Antara, I will invite you to stay with us for the further discussion if you are glad. So, I thank you very much for the presentation. So, very nice to meet you and that you have joined the Climate Social Forum. We are so glad. Oh, Shruti.
Oh, hi, this is Shruti Singh. Actually, I have a question for Antara.
Yeah.
Would you please mind if I ask something?
No, not at all.
Okay. Antara, can you please explain what are the reasons why the climate change affected the human being in today's scenario so much? I mean, why people in today's scenario, why people faces so many problems because of the climate changes?
Okay. Thank you for the questions, Shruti. Because first of all, I just want to tell you that people are not aware of this climate related issues, first of all. And after that, they are not knowing the importance of trees and, natural phenomena like rivers, mountains, trees and all. So according to me, I think that people should get aware of this, that if they will harm the natural things, they are the most sufferer, right? So I think this is very important to make them aware. This is what I have said earlier also, that from the childhood, from the grassroots level, child should must get training from their education, and from that itself, they should get training that how to, not education is sufficient. Practical knowledge is also very important. So I think people should get aware of this. What is climate change? What is climate justice? What will be, what are its drawbacks,
Yeah, I think, Antara, the current changes are more rapid than any known events in Earth history. The main cause is the emission of greenhouse gases, mostly carbon dioxide, I think. And like you said, the same thing. I think
carbon dioxide. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, can you please tell me that what are the precautions should be taken about this to procure our earth and the environment? Is
Yeah,
there any uh, basic
yeah.
precautions which we have to take in?
Plant more and more trees.
Yeah, that's
Don't
true.
don't yeah, don't
Yeah.
cut trees for you know,
Absolutely correct.
for your own purpose,
Yeah, absolutely correct. Uh,
and use
Thank you
less
so much for,
plastics. Use less
less
plastics.
better use of plastic. That is the
Yeah,
most important thing.
yeah.
Um,
So these are the, yeah.
No, yes, go ahead. Now, please let Antara respond, and then we can eventually reply. Okay, go ahead, Antara, if you want to finish the question. Okay. No, if you finish your intervention, Antara, I saw that there is a question from Angela. So, Angela, if you want to state your question. So, first of all, welcome, and so nice to see you here.
First of all, thanks to all you for this intervention on this interview. I please ask Domenico to help me with the translation. È molto importante investire sui bambini da piccolissimi. Sono loro il nostro futuro e sono loro che devono imparare a cambiare la mentalità anche degli adulti. Vi spiego, io vivo in Italia. No, stop. Vuoi tradurre, Domenico?
Sì, c'è anche il canale di traduzione, però non so se riesce a fare in contemporanea. But
Provo
I will,
a farlo.
no, I will translate for you. Ah, ok. Giulia sta traducendo. So for the other speakers, you can select the English channel for translation. There is Giulia that will translate. But basically, Angela was stating that it's important to invest in children, youths, because they are the future. Vai.
Ecco, io vivo in Italia e vedo una grande differenza, per esempio, per lo smaltimento dei rifiuti e la raccolta dei rifiuti. A Milano, che è la città in cui vivo, siamo molto avanti rispetto al resto dell'Italia. In questo momento sono a Roma e purtroppo la situazione è abbastanza indietro. Quindi è importante che anche gli adulti, attraverso i bambini o insomma insieme, imparino ad una raccolta differenziata, perché se si butta la plastica, la carta e il vetro tutto insieme, povero nostro mondo, nostro pianeta.
Ok, so I think Angela, tu hai finito il tuo statement, posso dare agli speaker la parola?
Finito, grazie. Grazie a tutti.
Grazie a te, Angela. So for the speaker, if you want to comment the words of Angela, let me know if you got the whole intervention. In the case, I will repeat some part. But she was addressing also the problem of waste management. In some cities, there is a good waste management. In other cities, there is bad waste management. But it's important to invest also in that, because even though the planet will be like finished. So I don't know if some Antal, if you want to, I don't know, have a reply on that. Antal, I think that you are muted.
Yeah, what Please, can you please ask the question again?
So Angela was stating to invest into youth generation and children, and also to understand that it's important to have a good waste management also in different cities, because in some cities there is a good waste management, in other not. For example, she mentioned the example of Italy. Milan is a good city in relates of waste management. Rome is not a good city, and of course it's important indeed to have good cities, or all the cities with a good waste management, because even though the planet, of course, will be very be affected. So if you want to add some points on that.
Sorry, your voice is not audible exactly.
Okay. So just I write in the chat.